This is CBN NewsWatch.
Thanks for joining us for CBN Newswatch. I'm Wendy Griffith. Hong Kong's pro-democracy opposition won a landslide victory in Sunday's district council elections. This comes as a clear rebuke to city leader Carrie Lam over her handling of recent violent protests in that country. Charlene Aaron has been following the story and joins us now with more on this. Charlene.
Wendy, some votes were still being counted early today, but Hong Kong media tallied that the pro-democracy camp had won a commanding majority in the vote for 452 district council seats. The results could force the central government in Beijing to rethink how to handle the unrest, which is in now the 6th month in Hong Kong. The election results are seen as a test of public support for anti-government protests that have persisted since June between thousands of people in Hong Kong and their government and the nation of China. And many say Carrie Lam must heed the demands of protesters, including free elections for the city's leader and legislature and an independent probe into alleged police brutality.
The pro-democracy camp had won a landslide victory on this DP election, and that indicates strongly to the government that people are unhappy on the existing arrangement, existing strategy for the government to handle the issues.
Meantime, a group of newly elected pro-democracy legislators gathered near Polytechnic University where protesters had taken siege. More than 1,000 protesters surrendered after clashes with police. Meanwhile, Lam says her government respects the results of the election and will listen to and seriously reflect on the opinions of members of the public. Wendy?
Thanks, Charlene. Senior international correspondent Gary Lane has also been following this story and will be with us in just a moment. Again, this was a huge victory for the pro-democracy movements there, but there's still a lot of questions, a lot of very important questions, and our senior international correspondent Gary Lane is with us now. Gary, big victory for the pro-democracy movement, but there was something missing, or was there something missing, I should say?
Well, there was something missing, and that was Joshua Wong. He's the young 23-year-old pro-democracy movement student leader, and he wasn't allowed to run in the legislative elections. Beijing would not allow him to run. He's been jailed in the past, very active, a strong Christian, Wendy, and so he was missing. But Joshua Wong said, look, he was still happy because his backup candidate, that's what he called him, his backup candidate, a person by the name of Kelvin Lam, did win. And so he was happy for Kelvin and also for the other pro-democracy activists.
You said he's a believer.
Yes.
What role did faith actually play in this outcome?
I think it played a big role because many people, not only in Hong Kong, Christians in Hong Kong, but around the world were praying for the peace of Hong Kong. They were praying that freedom and democracy would prevail, actually continue in Hong Kong, as Beijing has slowly taken away some of these rights.
So what about now? What do the pro-democracy folks want now? What do they hope will happen?
Well, all along, Wendy, the pro-democracy movement leaders have said they want 4 things. And originally, it started out being the extradition treaty that Beijing was pushing, that they wanted to put in place to force Hong Kong people to be sent back to the mainland of China for trial and conviction. They were against that. The people in Hong Kong were against that. And so Beijing, it quietly went away, but not entirely. So they want that done away with entirely. They don't want to see that come back as a plan. They also want their candidates to run not only for the legislature, as they did, but also for chief executive of Hong Kong, the person who actually runs Hong Kong on behalf of Beijing. And really, at this point, Beijing handpicks who those candidates will be. They say, no, that's not democracy. We want to have a selection of people that aren't handpicked by Beijing.
So how is Beijing responding to this?
They're eerily silent. It's kind of eerie. They're
trying to
just
figure out what their next
very
move is.
quiet on this. I haven't heard them say much. I mean, there have been some, I would say, pro-Beijing people in Hong Kong that have spoken out about this. But I think they're trying to figure out how to respond to this. And I think a lot will depend on what the students do, what the protest leaders and the democracy movement does in Hong Kong, how they respond now. Will the violence continue that we've seen in recent weeks? or will it kind of subside, quietly go away because they've won those seats in the legislature?
Well, Gary, how is President Trump likely to handle this in his ongoing talks with China?
I don't know that he's handling it well either. I mean, I'm sure, look, he's tweeted out he was happy to see democracy prevail there. But this does not make it easy for him in the trade talks with China, because he has said, look, President Xi is my friend. I want to work a deal with him. And he sees the whole pro-democracy movement and what's going on there right now as something that throws a monkey wrench into these talks to get a trade deal with China, which he looks at the long term and feels that that is very important for the United States, for our farmers, for our industry here and people here in the United States.
All right. Thanks so much, Gary, for your insights. We appreciate it. Well, more protests in Iraq today after 7 demonstrators were killed by security forces yesterday. The demonstrators blocked main roads and set up barricades of burning tires. Hundreds of university students also took to the streets as part of an ongoing anti-government protest. They're calling for the resignation of the government, blaming it for widespread corruption and high unemployment. Iraq's neighbor Iran has also been dealing with violent riots. U.S.-led sanctions have forced the regime to increase gas prices, which have sparked the protests. Amnesty International says between 100 and 200 people may have been killed in the protests. Israel prepares for a third election as Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu fights to stay in office. Last week, Israel's Attorney General announced indictments against Netanyahu in 3 separate cases, one for fraud, bribery, and breach of trust. Now at least one member of the Prime Minister's Likud party is calling for primary elections, challenging Netanyahu's leadership. He agreed yesterday to hold those elections within 6 weeks. Meanwhile, between now and December 11th, any Knesset member can gather 61 seats and form a government. Netanyahu must decide soon whether to waive his immunity as a Knesset member or fight the indictment from the Prime Minister's office.
Other legal systems do not accept this scenario, and it remains to be seen whether in Israel we will really face this very exceptional, unusual scenario of a person who is at the same time the Prime Minister of Israel and an accused person in very serious charges.
Benny Gantz, the leader of his main opposition party, demanded Netanyahu retire to fight his legal battles, but Netanyahu has vowed to stay in office. President Trump orders the Pentagon to let a convicted Navy SEAL keep his elite status. The SEAL, Chief Petty Officer Edward Gallagher, was demoted in rank after being convicted of posing with the dead body of an Islamic State prisoner. President Trump intervened, ordering Gallagher's rank, back pay, and pension be restored. Navy Secretary Richard Spencer was forced to resign Sunday over his handling of the investigation. Trump is expected to nominate retired Rear Admiral Kenneth Braithwaite, currently the ambassador to Norway, as next Secretary of the Navy. Well, billionaire and former New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg, one of the world's richest men, has formally launched a Democratic bid for president. Our Dale Hurd has the story.
The announcement by the 77-year-old former Republican ends weeks of speculation and pits the billionaire New Yorker against the billionaire New Yorker in the White House. Bloomberg, a former New York City mayor and media mogul, believes he has what it takes to beat Donald Trump.
And now he's taking on him to rebuild a country and restore faith in the dream that defines us. Mike Bloomberg for president.
I'm Mike Bloomberg, and I approve this message.
But Bloomberg didn't exactly get a warm welcome from the Democrats already running, who say there's too much money in politics.
That is why multi-billionaires like Mr. Bloomberg are not going to get very far in this election.
Telling billionaires that they can just come and buy elections, that doesn't make a democracy work.
Bloomberg, whose net worth is estimated at more than $50 billion, has committed at least $150 million of his fortune on the 2020 campaign. He says he will not accept a single political donation for his campaign or take a salary if elected president. His top campaign issues will be gun control and climate change. But he's seen as a moderate alternative to progressives like Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, rejecting the Green New Deal and Medicare for All. Bloomberg reportedly sees Joe Biden as his only serious obstacle to the nomination.
Mr. Vice President, will Mayor Bloomberg's focus on Super Tuesday states change your strategy in those states at all?
No. But Bloomberg's entrance into the race comes just 10 weeks before primary voting begins and shows he believes that the existing Democratic field is weak. Not much concern from President Trump's campaign, with a spokesman telling reporters they can keep adding more names to the pile, but no one beats Trump. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
Thanks, Dale. And be sure to catch up on the latest from our nation's capital this evening on Faith Nation. You can watch it right here on the CBN News Channel. Major winter storms and cold expected to hit the next few days, bringing snow to the central part of the country and then high winds in the east near the end of the week. The storms come as a record number of Americans, get this, 27 million, are expected to be traveling for Thanksgiving. The weather will create winter-like travel conditions. Snow, along with rain, has already hit the Northeast and parts of the Midwest, with snow driving cars off the road near Dayton, Ohio. Check that out. And the conditions making driving dangerous in New York and across the region as well. More snow is coming to the central part of the country. Here's Joe.
Weather Bell, we've been saying since the summer, we thought this was going to be a wild winter across much of the United States. But the Midwest, the lakes, the Central Plains have had 2 to 3 times their normal amount of snow already for this time of the year. And they're about to get hammered again. Nebraska, from Denver to Duluth, the first storm is going. That's tonight and tomorrow. And Minneapolis, St. Paul is probably going to get 6 to 12 inches of snow with this one.
Sounds chilly, and the storms will bring high winds to the east, including on Thanksgiving Day, so be sure to bundle up wherever you're going. Well, coming up, how one Florida high school student fought back when her school denied her request for a pro-life club. And before we go to the break, here's a look at what's trending on CBNNews.com.
Life is better with a good night's sleep. Get your free DVD or booklet of Protect Your Sleep as the world watches from the outside.
It's a big diplomatic tug-of-war here in the Middle East.
Go inside the story with Jerusalem Dateline.
Israeli archaeologists are talking about a discovery that could change the thinking about the Temple Mount.
Join CBN Jerusalem Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell and get the biblical perspective on the events shaping the world.
What starts in Israel then ends up going to other places.
Watch Jerusalem Dateline, Friday night at 9:30 on the CBN News Channel.
Life. It's meant to be lived fully. Jesus said it. I came to give you life. Life to the fullest. Life in your family. Life in your finances. Life in your body, mind, and spirit. Life in your everyday. At CBN.com, we're taking what Jesus said seriously. We're here to help you discover life. Life. Live it fully. CBN.com.
A Florida high school is in the news after a student claims she was initially denied the right to start a pro-life club on campus. According to the student, the Gulf Coast High School in Naples, Florida, originally told a pro-life club called Sharks for Life they were too political and too controversial to be allowed, while at the same time officially recognizing a pro-LGBTQ club. Well, with us now to talk more about this is Christy Hamrick with Students for Life. Christy, thanks for being with us.
Thanks so much for having me and for really drawing attention to the struggles that pro-life students like Gabriella Gabbard are experiencing all over the country today.
Well, Christy, I understand that since the story first broke, that high school is now actually allowing the pro-life group to meet. What changed?
Well, it's a work in progress and it's almost finalized. But what really changed was when Gabriella was applied to have this club. She had 2 sponsors, she had the paperwork, and she went in to meet with the assistant principal. And not only was the club denied, the 2 teachers who were agreeing to be sponsors, their jobs were threatened. So after that, Students for Life intervened, and Alliance Defending Freedom, and we all love those ADF attorneys, they partnered with us to send a legal letter to the school to let them know that's unconstitutional, unacceptable, and that we would stand with Gabriella and Sharks for Life. So the school we heard today, talking to ADF and talking with the school, that the process is in place. We believe that this club will be meeting shortly, but it has gone on since August, and it required legal action to get a pro-life club in a school that had 78 other clubs, including animal rights clubs, including, as you said, pro-LGBTQ clubs. So it's really disheartening in a way that we have to threaten legal action for pro-life students to speak for mothers and their preborn children.
Christy, you know, it's interesting because some of the reports I read today, the school is now claiming, hey, we were okay with this from the get-go, but we just didn't have the teachers in place to supervise. So what's happening there?
Well, that is not at all what we and our attorneys found out as we looked into it. Again, there were 2 teachers that were willing to be sponsors for this club, and 2 teachers who were told that the decision to be with the pro-life club could hurt their careers. This is obviously going forward, and we're glad that the school is reconsidering, but it did take legal intervention and our standing with those teachers and, frankly, pro-life students to just get the Constitution to work for people in public schools. We shouldn't have to do that, but we do have to do that all the time. Well,
you know, it is sad, but the Alliance, as you mentioned, the Alliance Defending Freedom, they brought up the fact that this is simply unconstitutional. So that was your major trump card, right?
Well, and also free speech. And so to that extent, yes, unconstitutional. But students in public schools have the same free speech rights as you and I. And if they comply with the processes, they fill out their paperwork, they get a sponsor, there's a lot of steps. And I think that's what's interesting for people to know watching this show. We're on more than 1,220 campuses, college, university, high school, and middle school campuses with Students for Life in all 50 states. And administrations often put up barriers to students, making us do all this paperwork and follow all these steps, but we do it. In this case, we had followed through with the paperwork, gotten the sponsors, and they still tried to shut it down. We're thankful for ADF, but we're also thankful for students willing to go to all that trouble and work and be courageous in the light of what can be very scary, especially if you're a high school student and your vice principal and your administration is coming out against you. That's not a simple thing to stand up against.
Amazing what can happen when you speak up and let your voice be heard. Christy Hamrick with Students for Life, thanks so much for your time and being with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Well, up next, Chick-fil-A once again making headlines. Why their latest move is sparking controversy in the Christian community.
On October 1st, 1961, history was made when a tiny station began transmitting the first signals of the Christian Broadcasting Network.
CBN, the Christian Broadcasting Network.
And now, a new era has begun with the all-new CBN News Channel.
Just moments ago, the Iron Dome intercepted an incoming rocket right on the Gaza border.
Administering in this area, spiritual warfare is definitely involved.
A 24/7 news network, bringing you the news you want from a source you can trust.
In Kenya, 40% of the medical services are actually provided by these Christian hospitals.
Let's talk about the economy.
Believers here are joining together to win people to Jesus Christ.
All your favorite shows now in one place. Go to CBNNewsChannel.com to find out how to get the CBN News Channel on your TV all day, every day. CBN News. Life is better with a good night's sleep. Get your free DVD or booklet of Protect Your Sleep today.
Life. It's meant to be lived fully. Jesus said it. I came to give you life. Life to the fullest. Life in your family. Life in your finances. Life in your body, mind, and spirit. Life in your everyday. At CBN.com, we're taking what Jesus said seriously. We're here to help you discover life. Life. Live it fully. CBN.com.
When I came to Regent University, it's like the world opened up. I felt like I needed to advance my career and go back to school. Regent was a perfect fit for me. The Regent professors are world-class. You are equipped. The focus of the faculty is on each individual student, whether it's online or in person. You become a part of Regent's family. You carry with you not just the content and the knowledge, but the confidence to understand that we can be significant in the world.
Regent University. Follow your path.
The latest moves by Chick-fil-A have set off a strong response from its staunch supporters and customers. Our George Thomas took a closer look at what happened with FaithWire's Dan Andros.
Chick-fil-A's changes with its charitable giving set off a firestorm last week that is still trending into this week. FaithWire's Dan Andros joins us now with more on the story that is still a talker. So Dan, quickly bring us up to speed on what started this all.
Yeah, well, what started it all was when Chick-fil-A, an article came out in a business publication called biznow.com. And an executive from Chick-fil-A had kind of announced that they were no longer going to be donating to certain charities, specifically the Salvation Army and the Fellowship of Christian Athletes. And, you know, a lot of people just brushed this off as well. You know, those agreements were up and they're just moving their money in a different direction. But when you look at that article and the quotes that were in BizNow, it seemed very clear and very evident that what they were worried about and the change of direction was brought on by the fact that they were getting sick and tired of the negative headlines that were coming from LGBT activists who constantly complained. And we saw when they have recently been trying to open up new locations, they run into resistance. They get all these protesters saying we don't want, you know, anti-LGBT views here, et cetera, et cetera. And so in this article, the executive made it very clear that they were sick and tired of that, and they wanted to send a clear message going forward. And unless BizNow misrepresented what this executive said, they indicated that this includes not donating to, quote, anti-LGBTQ charities in the future. And so this, of course, had the Salvation Army, who responded publicly, very irritated response, by the way. Of course, it may look them like they were anti-LGBT organizations, when we know that in a lot of cases that just means from the critic standpoint that they're just in favor of the standard traditional biblical definition of marriage. So that's kind of what set the whole thing off in the first place.
So Chick-fil-A wanted to make its point very clear. What responses are you seeing to that clarity?
Yeah, well, we're seeing a mixed response. There are a lot of people who are standing by the company. And you got to remember Chick-fil-A. I mean, this is a place where people love Chick-fil-A. Obviously, they have great food and great service and all of that. And we like their Christian foundation that they have, but people really went out of their way to support Chick-fil-A precisely because they stand up to this sort of angry online mob that constantly, calls Christians haters for this and that. And so people appreciated that and went out of their way to support them for that. So if it is indeed true that they are caving to this pressure, a lot of people are frustrated by that. So we're seeing a mix. It just comes down to how people interpret what it is that Chick-fil-A actually did. And so people seem to be interpreting that two different ways.
Dan, you have a show on this network. It's called Faith versus Culture. Tell us what's brewing on tonight's show.
Yeah, we're going to talk a little bit about how do we as Christians address transgendered people, because the SBC president, J.D. Greer, made a comment that, raised a lot of eyebrows. And he said we should use pronoun hospitality, and that we should just go ahead and use the transgendered person's preferred pronoun when addressing them. This raised a lot of eyebrows in the Christian community.
Okay. Dan, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, George. Well, after the break, Dolly Parton's latest work is earning her a Grammy nomination. Why she says she was being led to make more Christian music.
Life is better with a good night's sleep. Get your free DVD or booklet of Protect Your Sleep today.
I'm Ephraim Graham, and this is Studio 5. Cruise with me as I discover the good things happening in the world of music, sports, television, and movies.
The fact that Ryan Coogler was going to be directing the film, I knew that something special was going to happen.
We'll chat with artists at the forefront of entertainment and explore the connection between popular culture and faith.
I asked my pastor, I said, well, does that mean I'm supposed to be a preacher? He says, well, no, you already have a pulpit.
Watch Studio 5 Wednesday night at 9:30.
Remember for a moment what it was like to be a child. You believed every story you were told. You saw a world full of endless possibilities. What stories will the world's orphaned and at-risk children believe? We believe the Bible tells the only story truly worth believing. We believe that every child should have the opportunity to dream, the chance to take challenges and turn them into possibilities, the chance to stand on the promises of God, to recognize their place in the greatest story ever told. They have their whole lives ahead of them. Theirs is a world of endless possibilities. They are looking for a story to believe. We will tell them that story. Will you join us?
I am Regent's first ROTC graduate student.
Country music legend Dolly Parton could be taking home a Grammy for her recent work in the Christian music genre. She has been nominated at the upcoming 2020 Grammy Awards for Best Contemporary Christian Music Performance and Song after she teamed up with Christian band For King and Country on their single God Only Knows. In an interview with People magazine, she says, "I just felt God was calling me into that. I've always felt my music was more my ministry than a job. I just feel this day and time we need more people that are in a position to help, to try to do something, if they can, to brighten the world a little bit. That's what I'm hoping to do." She has also released 2 other faith-centered singles called There Was Jesus and Faith. And Dolly has always been a bright light no matter what she does, and we'll look forward to those. Well, that's it for this edition of CBN Newswatch. We hope you'll join us next time. Until then, from all of us, have a great day, and God bless you.